Good afternoon, and welcome to the live stage at Access Live. Please welcome the Senior Vice President of Member Advocacy for WSWA, Catherine McDaniel.
Hello. While diversity and inclusion aren't always easy to accomplish, we know that it makes a tangible impact on the quality of our offerings and our bottom lines. Here to tell us more about the whys and the hows of creating more inclusive organizations that outperform our competition is a giant, and she is a giant in our industry and is a really wonderful person. Please join me in welcoming the CEO of Lobos Tequila, Lobos 1707 Tequila and Mezcal, and co-founder of Pronghorn, Dia Sims.
Good afternoon. Everybody hear me okay? All right. Now these things always feel a little bit like a family reunion, so I hear some like rowdy uncles in the back. So just let me know if you can't hear me okay. And some rowdy aunties. So thank you, Catherine, so much for the introduction. These things do truly feel like a family reunion, especially after, God, it's been a long time now. I think it's been like 4 years, right, since we've been able to be in person. And it makes a huge difference when you have a chance to feel included. See what I did there, right? In live, in person. So Catherine, thank you for the introduction. I'm going to reiterate, in case I don't already know you, your cousin I haven't met yet. I am Dia Sims. It's Dia, like day in Spanish. Put that in your brain. I don't take it for granted, right, being a part of an industry like this. I started off my adult career out of college working for the Department of Defense on things like helicopters and tripartite agreements with France and Singapore and the US on cat vision goggles and Navy jets, and it was very serious. And our industry is serious, don't get me wrong, but it was like very serious. So after being in this industry on and off about 25 years, every single morning, like legitimately, I feel grateful, right, to be able to sell tequila and talk about how important inclusion is for our bottom line and work alongside people I really admire and really respect, and also just have fun, right? Your life is short, so I'm always grateful to be a part of this incredible industry. During that time, I got to work with a lot of incredible brands. Way back, I used to work with Old Seagrams. Anybody remembers those days? So worked on brands like Crown and Martell, and did some fun stuff with Appleton Rum, and got to work with Tanqueray and Guinness. Spent a long time in the early days building a brand called Ciroc Vodka, and I'm really proud today to be CEO of Lobos 1707 Tequila and Mezcal, which is a brand that has over 50% diverse ownership. So I want to talk a little bit about my time at Ciroc, because I think it's a beautiful example of what intentional inclusion looks like. In the very early days in 2007, when there weren't a lot of these kind of culture and commerce deals in the industry, right? It was somewhat revolutionary. And when we put together, me working on the side of Combs Enterprises with a gentleman, Sean Puff Daddy Diddy, P. Diddy, Brother Love. I don't know I didn't check Instagram today, so I'm not sure what his name is today. Back then, we called him Puff, deal with Diageo, and it was really quite forward thinking, right? It was really being inclusionary on purpose at a time when no one was talking about this at all, right? Sometimes it can feel like inclusion again. I did inclusion last week, right, nowadays, but back then it was very much not a point of conversation, but what it was a commercial opportunity for us to access an audience that had not been engaged, invested in a requited and consistent manner, right? And when Catherine said inclusion is good for the bottom line, all the facts, all the math, every study bears that out, right? So I think we still have to get over the hurdle of viewing that like we have to be intentional about this. But we're all pretty intentional about making money, right? So just make sure you're including, right, that intentionality of inclusion as a subset of one of your commercial imperatives. When we built that brand and grew it from about 75,000 cases to now, Claudia, check my math, but it's well over 10 million cases sold, right, since inception. And, you know, at the time when it was growing, it felt like it was growing so fast, and people in the industry were almost a little nervous, like, oh, it's taking share from other brands at the same price point. And it felt like it was a zero-sum game. But in fact, it wasn't. Right now, the hindsight of looking back, you now have another billion-dollar brand in the industry that invited more people to drink responsibly in the industry, and we actually grew the pie. There's a lot of misconception that the game of inclusion, diversity, if you will, is a game of musical chairs. When in fact, if you are doing it right, it should be about building a bigger table. As we think back to how when you're doing it right, it really works, and it drives more jobs, more diversity, more innovation, more retention, right? Having had the chance to live that example, I'm always have been thoughtful about, okay, how do we invite more people into the industry in a way that's both good for those communities and good for the industry? And a few years ago, when as a country, really for the planet Earth, we all went through this reckoning. And to the credit of the leadership of this industry, I started getting a lot of calls. What can we do? We do want to do the right thing in this industry, which, I have friends that still work in defense, so other industries weren't doing that, right? So it's a testament to the humans who work in this industry of like, well, we want to right-size things. We want to do the right thing. We want to reflect the consumer we serve. And I'm going to tell you a story about an organization that myself and two other co-founders founded called Pronghorn. And some of you have heard it. If you can't memorize it back to me, you haven't heard it enough. So, so what we did is we got these calls and we want to do better. And if we're just not in the business of doing anything a little bit, right? Or small or a parade or a mural. We're like, if we're going to do it, let's figure out how we can actually change the industry. Let's figure out how to set up a template for effectively diversifying actually any industry. And we're going to start with the spirits industry, and we're going to start with the Black community in the United States, and we're going to build an open code and learn in real time like a scientist so that we can quickly share for other communities within our industry and share it for American economy at large so other industries can learn from the great example and the leadership of the spirits industry. The reason why we call it Pronghorn is the pronghorn is the second fastest land mammal in the world, second only to the cheetah. Now, when I first brought this up, everyone was like, what? What's a pronghorn? So I'm trying to get to the point that when you Google pronghorn, we beat the animal. But if you don't know, pronghorn is an interesting animal only in Montana. And the interesting thing about it is it can go fast for a long time. Like if you ever driven past Yellowstone, like it will race you on the highway. It goes very fast for an extended period of time. So when we thought about what we needed to do to develop a template on how to effectively diversify an industry, right? The idea was we have a lot of ground to cover, but we're impatient, so we don't have a lot of time, right? We need speed and we need endurance. We want to go far, but we have to go fast. And we felt like this animal was a beautiful manifestation of what it means to be intentional about inclusion. Now, when I grew up, you guys probably heard this, my mother would say all the time, like, how do you bite an elephant? One bite at a time. So in this world of macro muckery, you can use the curse word in your free time, there's a lot of challenges, right, that we're dealing with. So we're like, look, if we want to do this, I want to get it down to the micro level. How many blocks, how many zip codes, how many humans, how many stores, what distributor involvement, how many salespeople, how many interns, and how many people in the C-suite will actually change the industry from year one, day one, right, to year 10. And we did a ton of work on the modeling. It was COVID, so we were home doing our work. And we did a ton of understanding what the economic impact would be for the Black community in the United States and for the spirits industry. Because I often say, right, the best commercial for diversity is commercial success, right? So what we have built is a standalone for-profit entity that is focusing on diversifying the industry to the benefit of the industry. So delighted that through Discus, the supplier tier has fully come on board and supportive. We're here today rallying the wholesalers. You're up next to make sure we get your same level of commitment. And the way we have focused on Pronghorn is really on two prongs, like the horns on a pronghorn if you haven't seen one. One is on entrepreneurship. This area is incredibly important to this room, right? Because what we need help with is in carrying, happily selling, right, minority and women-owned brands. The second piece is around entrepreneurship and driving more participation from the intern to the C-suite. We are investing, with the help of our anchor investor Diageo, in 57 Black-owned brands. Excited to say this Friday will be 12 months for Pronghorn. We've invested in over 12 brands, You could at this point have a full bar. Yes, thank you. You can sample them also at our Pronghorn booth today, but what really excites me is if you choose, you can have a full bar, gin, whiskey, a bourbon, tequila, all by Black-owned spirits, right? And that is transformative when you think about changing communities and making sure you have the right example in place. On the flip side, in terms of entrepreneurship, we are driving 1,800 new net gain Black employees over 10 years into the industry. The math is not arbitrary. We did a lot of work on who works here now, what does the labor force say, how many more people do we need to get to, and even representation, so that today's status quo, where the Black American population consumes 12 to 14% of spirits in our industry, which is pretty much pro rata to the population, we would go to where we are today, where it's less than 2% at the executive level, less than 7% from an employment base, and get to the point of being pro rata. And to do that, the math per employer is actually quite doable, right? So as an example, and anybody who's here, looking at some of you, from a wholesaler standpoint, if every member of WSWA did a net gain hiring of 3 additional Black American employees per year for 10 years, check. We did it. Now we have to do some retention work, right, at year 10, but you've actually accomplished it. And when we think about these massive goals and you wake up in the morning, we're like, no, we can do this, right? Let us put the intentionality behind it. Let us do the math. Let us have the level of focus. Let us hold hands together as an industry in a way that many other industries don't. And we know that we can actually get across this marathon, right, through the work that we can do together. On the employment side, the work that has already been done and where we actually need help, and I ask you to go check out pronghorn.co, no M, just C-O, is right now we're going into our second round of interns this summer. So if you don't have one working at your organization, check it out. Make sure those of you, or pass the word to your hiring managers and HR departments. We're also looking for great mentors. Tiffany, you got the Pronghorn lead here, so yeah. So if we are, and we've already done a round of mentorship so that we know that our industry can be confusing. I started off by saying I worked at the Department of Defense, and the book of acronyms that you need to memorize at DoD is bananas, until I came to the spirits industry and was like, oh, I was in training, I didn't know. So it is important to have mentorship to understand the regulatory whiplash and the acronyms and the shorthand that we have in this industry. It's hard to kind of be what you haven't seen. And as we bring new people into this industry, that is good for the industry, right? We want to make sure that we're there to nurture and hold their hands on that journey. And we're looking for participation really here and anywhere that I go. And, in closing, and then I'll open it up for any questions, is that we work in an industry that has pretty enviable year-over-year growth.